Hello, and thank you for coming today. My name is Sonia Lal, and I'm a former Harvard interviewer. And today I'm going to give you an introduction to how college admissions works, so that your student can have the best chance of admissions to their top choice college. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a former Harvard interviewer and Harvard grad, and I was trained in college admissions by the deans of several Ivy League universities, including Harvard, Princeton, and Brown, and top colleges such as Northwestern and Stanford. I have a master's in education, and I'm a former teacher and also a member of the National Association for College Admissions Counseling and the National Association of Gifted Children. I've also served on the admissions committee for the Illinois Math and Science Academy, and also evaluated science research projects that their students do. I've had success getting students into Harvard, Stanford, Brown, Northwestern, Washington University, Johns Hopkins, University of California, Berkeley, as well as schools, Big Ten schools such as University of Illinois, Champaign, University of Michigan, University of Iowa, Mizzou, and Georgia Tech. So I work with students who are applying to all sorts of universities, not just Ivy Leagues. So as you can tell, the acceptance rates for top colleges are very, very small these days. Recent 2014 statistics show Harvard acceptance rate at 5.9%, Princeton 7.28%, and Stanford again 5.69%, MIT 8.2%. So a lot of these top universities have very, very small chances of admission for students. And the reason for that is a lot of baby boomer generation parents, all their children are going to college. So part of that is just the sheer numbers of people applying. In the past, if you had a perfect SAT score, or if you were one of the 20,000 plus valedictorians in the United States, if you went to the right prep school, or if you had the right connections, you were pretty sure you could get into a top university. However, things are very different these days. About 74% of the students who applied with SAT scores over 2,300 were not admitted into Princeton. And that's a statistic from 2008. So just having top scores and being valedictorian is not enough as it used to be. So let's take an example where you take the role of an admissions officer at an Ivy League university, and your job is to admit 1 out of the 4 students here. So we'll go through each student in a little detail, and then you can decide who you'd like to admit. So Trisha is in the top 15% of her class, high SAT scores. Her essay was very good. She was captain of cross country, and she was also on varsity crew, and that team was a state champion. She's also a legacy student, which means her parents went to the college she's applying to, and she's being recruited for crew by the coach. Then we have Mary. Mary is in the top 5% of her class, very strong SAT scores, strong essays. She was editor of the newspaper, captain of the debate and constitution teams, and president of a community service club. She's also Native American, and she's gone through some hardship in her life. Melanie is in the top 10% of her class. Her SAT scores are not as great as the other students. Her essays are not as great either, but she was captain of cross country and secretary of her culture club at school. She is from Africa, and she's gone through significant hardship in the sense that her father has been paralyzed for a number of years. So she's had to take care of siblings and so forth. And then the last student is Steve. He's in the top 5% of his class, perfect SAT scores. His essay was one of the best in years. He was a math researcher, president of his math club. He was a top 10 presenter at the MIT summer research program, and he also tutored fellow students. Steve is Russian American and his parents are divorced. So I'll give you a few minutes to just think about, who you would admit into the Ivy League university that you're representing as an admissions officer. So you're probably wondering who got in. The person who got in was Mary. She was very much in the top of her class, and she is also Native American. She's gone through hardship, and she's shown significant leadership. Compared to the other students, Melanie was not as strong academically, so we weren't sure if she would be a good fit. So Trisha, she was not admitted. She had a lot of privilege in her life, but there was nothing about her that made her stand out compared to the other students. You'll have to remember that the admissions officers are looking to create a well-rounded class, so they want students who are very different from each other. So they want a very diverse student body. And Trisha didn't stand out at this time. Steve was a genius, clearly a math genius. And the reason that he was not admitted is because in his recommendation letter, one of the teachers expressed that he was a little arrogant. And universities have often been very sensitive to the things that come out in recommendation letters. In this case, this particular Ivy League university had a situation similar to Steve in the past, another student who was a math genius. And one day he didn't feel like going to the math competition, and that university lost the math competition, and they were counting on him to represent them. So they didn't want to take a chance with someone who had kind of a negative remark in his recommendation letter. So as you can see, admissions is a very artful matter. It's more of an art rather than a science. And it's difficult when you're doing this 8 hours a day, making these kinds of decisions. So it's good to remember who the admissions officers are who are going to be reading your application. 62% are women, 38% are men, 75% are Caucasian, 2.9% are Asian. And they're working 8 hours a day for many, many months. And they're exhausted. They're often reading too quickly, and they don't have a lot of time for detail. So initially, they may give an application as little as 15 minutes of review time before they decide whether this student is a good fit for this university or not. And as you just did that case study, you can see that admissions is more of an art and not a science. It's not an exact science. And one of the formulas that admissions officers use in order to understand who to admit and who not to admit is at Ivy League universities is called an academic index. And this is a quantitative number that each student is given. Initially, the Ivy League schools used this academic index in order to make sure that the athletes who competed against each other had a minimum standard of academic qualification. And the Ivy Leagues are really a group of 8 top universities on the East Coast who compete with each other athletically. So the rating system for determining the academic index, they take your SAT or ACT score, they add your subject tests, SAT subject test scores, and then they add that to your GPA and class rank. That will give you a rating on a scale of 1 to 240. For an athlete at an Ivy League university, they have to have a minimum of 176. And a high academic index is expected for all students who apply. And then once the student receives a number, which is calculated, there's different ratings, different categories. Now each university is different. Some have 5 or 6 categories. I'm going to give you an example right now of the University of Pennsylvania, which has 9 categories. The average academic index score depends for each university. It's a little bit different. As you can see, for Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, it's around 220. And for Columbia and Cornell, it's around 210, with Dartmouth, Brown, and Penn being in the middle. So basically, each student is given a rating in terms of what category they fit into. In addition to academic qualification, they also want to know about students' extracurricular and personal qualities. So in school, you've probably heard about multiple intelligences, which was developed by Howard Gardner from Harvard University. And in school, generally you measure verbal, linguistic, and mathematical intelligence, which is reading, writing, math, and science. Those are generally the things that are given the most emphasis in school. There's also musical intelligence, artistic, athletic intelligence, interpersonal, which means that someone is good at interacting with other people, intrapersonal, which means that someone is very much in touch with their inner life, their thoughts and feelings, naturalistic intelligence, of how in tune someone is with nature and the natural world, plants and animals and so forth, and also existential intelligence, which has to do with the meaning of life and spirituality. So universities know that students who are well-rounded are going to be more successful in life. So if they have developed more than one intelligence, then they will be much more successful. And they're looking for those qualities when they're reading college applications. So the Dean of Harvard, for example, says that they're looking for intellectual imagination, strength of character, and good judgment. And how that plays out into the admissions process is, again, it's a kind of rating system. And this may be written or it may be unwritten, but it's something that the admissions officer is trying to gauge for each student. So someone at the top of this kind of rating would have a real love of learning, cream of the crop. They'd be very solid in terms of their character, have humility, and so forth. Someone with a little bit lower rating would be a very high achieving student, but maybe they are competitive and high achieving because they want to do better than the next student and not so much from a genuine love of learning. And then there would be students who are diligent, but they don't have a lot of creativity or initiative. And then there would be students who are solid, but they don't stand out in any way. So in addition to the academic index rating, the admissions officers are also trying to rate students based on extracurricular activities and personal qualities. So you're probably wondering, how do I stand out from the crowd? When you're applying to college, you definitely want to differentiate yourself, and that's what we'll talk about now. There's a couple different ways to differentiate yourself. Number one, you could be a legacy student, which means that your mother or father went to that university, and often legacy students have a higher chance of admission. You could be a recruited athlete, which means that the coach from an athletic team at the university wants you at the university to play on the team. And you could be a minority student, which means you're either Hispanic, Native American, or African American. As you can see from this slide, the acceptance rate at Dartmouth for an average student is around 15%. For a legacy, it's 43%. Recruited athletes, 60%, and so on. So that's one way to differentiate yourself. It's an important tip factor. Other tip factors could be that you come from a low-income family, low-income rural area, or you're a first-generation student, which means no one in your family has gone to college before, or perhaps you overcame some kind of hardship. And then on the other end, if your family makes a big donation, or if you're a VIP or celebrity, these are some other important tip factors that can tip the scale in your favor in college admissions. So if you have any of those tip factors working in your favor, that's great. A lot of my students don't have those things going for them. So then that means what I do with the student is very important in helping them to discover their genius and how to bring that genius out and have it play out in their life in terms of extracurriculars and serving others. So one of the reasons that students work with college coaches, such as myself, is that often the parents don't have time or expertise to be learning about college admissions. 26% of high-achieving students are using professional college coaches for college application help. And there's lots of deadlines to manage. It helps to stay on track if you have someone to be accountable to. It helps to relieve the stress about college admissions, especially within the family. Maybe there's less arguments at the dinner table and so forth. Guidance counselors may not have the time to give you personal attention, or they may not have the expertise in highly selective colleges. So the value of working with a college coach such as myself is there's a lot less stress during the process, and it can become a meaningful journey in which the student learns about themselves, they stay motivated, and they grow in their self-confidence. I also work with students to teach them things such as mindfulness, visualization, and breathing exercises that can help relieve the stress of the whole process. And usually I start working with students as early as 8th grade. I help them choose what classes to sign up for in high school. I help them develop their critical reading and vocabulary skills, study skills, choosing what extracurricular activities to participate in. I help them develop summer plans, and I help them to win awards that they may be eligible for. Now the home stretch, junior and senior year, are the most important years of a student's college admission life, and there's 14 different things involved in the college admissions process, which we'll go over in detail. The first thing that I do with students is college profiling, which is helping them through one of their first major decisions. There's more than 3,000 colleges in the United States, and I help students to apply to the top 300 colleges. I help them to balance their dreams with reality. I help them research college programs in great detail, and then come up with a list of safety, likely, and reach schools. A good fit is the most important thing for college admissions for any student. So if I ask you what's the best song in the world, well, that just depends on your taste. So similarly with each student, it depends on what they're looking for in a college and who they are. College profiling is very important. It's very important to have a balance between the safety and the target and the reach schools. I had one student who had a 34 on his ACT, and he did not get into University of Wisconsin-Madison, which was shocking to everyone. And we're going to discuss yield rate in a little bit, but I think that the university thought that this student was using their school as a safety school, and that if they gave him a letter of admission, he may not come. So it's a little bit of a dance between whether the university thinks you're going to come or not. And so what you think would have been a safety school in the past may not be that way now. The most important factor in college admissions is grades. So if your grades are not that good, you need to ask your teacher for guidance or get tutoring to help improve your grades. Often I guide students in doing extra credit, developing better study skills, and help them go above and beyond on assignments. The SAT and ACT, both of these tests measure the student's reasoning and aptitude. A good SAT score is about 740 or higher. A good ACT score is 34 or higher. Low scores, especially for Ivy League universities, are not competitive enough. And at liberal arts colleges, such as Ivy Leagues and top colleges, verbal scores are often more important than math scores, because the student will be spending many, many hours, reading, writing papers, much more than they will doing mathematical problems, unless the student is going into engineering. Now, research has shown that about 10 to 40 hours of private tutoring can help boost test scores. So I do have a network of tutors that I help students connect with in case they would like tutoring. One of the benefits of that is that the tutor reports to me directly after every session so that I understand where the student is at, and I can help them overall with that understanding in their whole admissions process. And I also help students understand score choice and superscoring and how that can work in their favor. SAT subject tests are required by some colleges, and they test high school level subjects such as biology, chemistry, physics. They're about an hour long, and they measure the knowledge of that subject. They're pretty easy to study for, and sometimes they can be more important than grades, because high schools, teachers, you know, there's so many different ways of grading, different kinds of teachers, different types of high schools, and they all have their own systems. So by looking at a student's subject test, a college can get a better understanding of how they compare to each other. AP tests are not required by colleges, but they are very good for measuring writing and thinking skills, and often they can boost a low academic index. As you probably know, AP tests can often give you college credit, and you can save a lot of tuition. I know at Harvard, for example, if a student has enough AP classes, they can skip a year of college. So it's good to take as many as you can bear without stressing yourself out. And also take the test, study and prepare for it so that you may receive a distinction as an AP scholar. So essays are very important. For top colleges, you need to write between 3 to 5 essays per college. What they're looking for is, will you be a good roommate? Are you a good person? And then they're also looking for how much intellectual promise you have, how you think, and so forth. So it has to be a balance between those things. Often with essays, rough is better, because colleges know that a lot of students are getting help with essays, whether it's from a college coach or an English teacher or parents or peers and so forth. But it's important to remember that an English teacher is not an admissions officer, so they're not looking at the essay from the same perspective. So that's one important thing, is to make sure the essay is not too polished. And you know your essay is successful when the admissions officer reads your essay and they want you at their college. Teacher recommendations are very important. They can make or break a close case. And one of the important questions that a teacher recommendation answers is whether this student is the driving force behind class discussions, or if the student is merely diligent. Will the student shake things up on campus or blindly follow the lead of others? And then how does the student compare to other students? So the dean of Harvard, for example, said he wants a class of students who's going to change the world. And this is one of the ways to really understand about the student in greater detail. Extracurricular activities are also very important, demonstrating leadership, good character, emotional intelligence, which they say is even more important for success than just IQ. Extracurriculars can also help you to differentiate yourself, show some academic initiative, passion, and it can also show that you're a well-rounded student, but then you also have depth in some area. And summer activities, I just want to point out, are very important because colleges want to know what are you doing with your summer. If they don't see that you're doing much with your summer, they may just guess that you're playing with friends and watching TV. So one of the things I do with students is I help them to develop a list of extracurriculars to focus on, and then help them develop summer plans. The resume is an important part of the college admissions process, even though it's not required. It can be very important in highlighting student accomplishments, and it can also be a way to apply to a particular section of the college. For example, if you're applying to an engineering school and you've done research, you may want to submit a research abstract. Or if you are planning to be recruited for athletics, you may need to prepare an athletic resume. You also want to consider a music or art supplement if you're applying to a music school or an art school within a college, or if you're applying to an architecture school, then you want to create a portfolio. So some of these may be required and some may not. It just depends. But it's always better to have a resume rather than not. And in addition to everything we've just covered, there's a couple things you can do that are important. It'll give you like little extra credit points. Visiting a college is very important because it shows that you're really interested in the college, and that's called demonstrated interest. So nowadays, because of the internet, people can click on a button on the Common App and they can apply to like 10, 20 schools very easily. And a college doesn't know if you're serious about their school or not. But if you visit them, that's an indication that you're serious about the college. One of the reasons demonstrated interest is important is because a college wants to know if they give you a letter of admission, if you're actually going to come to the college or not. So if they give out 100 letters and 70 students decide that they're going to attend the university, that's a 70% yield rate. And if they give out 100 letters and only 30 come, that's a 30% yield rate. The colleges with the higher yield rates fare better on the college rankings of US News and World Report. So it's a little bit of a game that they're playing, and it's important to be aware of how this can work in your favor. A college interview is another way to show your demonstrated interest. And an interview for MIT can last anywhere between 1 to 2 hours. For Washington University, it could be anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. But that's an important thing to do, again, to show your demonstrated interest. I also help students win awards that they may be eligible for, apply for scholarships, and then also review their social media presence. So the trend these days is that admissions officers are looking at students' Facebook profiles and so forth in order to get a sense of the student. That's definitely on the rise. So it's important to make sure your presence is a good presence. The Common App is the online application system that most colleges use these days. It's important to know how everything on the Common App will be understood by the admissions officer. So it's important to review your answers carefully. They're going to ask about parent education levels, what the parents do for work. They'll ask about ethnicity, languages that are spoken at home, siblings, and what field of study that you're interested in. These are just a few of the things that they'll look at. And everything is basically taken in context. So what this means is, if your father is the CEO of a big bank, they are going to know that your family had money for tutoring, and they're going to have higher expectations for your grades. So if you're a B student, that's not going to be as impressive to them. Now say you are from a low-income family and you managed to get straight A's. Well, that's quite an achievement because you didn't have money for tutoring, perhaps, and you didn't have parents that encouraged you in terms of your academic work, perhaps. Right now it's very difficult. Asian students, the bar is higher for Asian students because they know that Asian parents have high expectations for their students in terms of education. So they look at everything in context. It's almost like taking a case before a judge. They look at everything and try to understand the student and who they are, where they come from, and have they used the resources that were given to them to the best of their ability, or did they not use those resources? Because that's an indication of how you may use the opportunities that will be given to you at their university. Financial aid is also an important topic for everyone. These days you can find out an estimate of how much money you would have to pay at a college by going onto the college website's net price calculator and typing in some personal information and getting an estimate. A lot of Ivy League universities these days have something called need-blind admissions, which means there's no wealth advantage. They don't look to see how much your parents are making when they make admissions decisions. Harvard and a couple other colleges have huge endowments and really excellent financial aid programs. As of 2014, if your family makes less than $65,000 a year, your family pays nothing and you can attend Harvard for free. If your family makes less than $150,000 a year, you would only pay 10% tuition, and there's no loans anymore at Harvard. So that's just an example. Ivy Leagues, they cannot match merit-based or athletic-based financial aid packages, but a lot of them have very good financial aid programs. And the reason I have this in here is just for everyone to see that there is no way you can tell whether or not you can afford a college ahead of time, and that should not be an obstacle when you're applying. These are some of the things that you don't want to do. You don't want to wait until the last minute. Every minute counts. You know, time is of the essence in the college admissions process. So basically, students who come to me right before the applications are due, there's a lot of missed opportunities had they come to me a year or two earlier. Waiting until the last minute means you don't have a lot of time for planning, there's a lot of stress, and your application won't be as thoughtful. So if you're thinking about, college coaching, it's better to get started right away. A lot of parents make the mistake of focusing only on SAT or ACT prep, but as you can see, the admissions process involves a lot more than just that. And don't lose hope. I had a student in the western suburbs in Illinois, very, very wealthy neighborhood, and the guidance counselor told her she didn't have a chance to get into Stanford. I worked with her for just a few months before the application was due, and she got in. So don't lose hope, don't listen to any naysayers, but also act quickly and don't wait until the last minute. And remember that college admissions is a marathon, it's not a sprint. The longer you prepare for college applications ahead of time, the better your chances of admission. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something about college admissions, and I look forward to working with you.